Exotic driver configurations. In today's video, I'm reviewing the Simgot Supermix 4, which has a rather unique driver configuration of one dynamic driver, one balanced armature, one planar driver, and one piezoelectric driver. Does it sound any good? Well, keep watching to find out. Let's get it. What's cracking, audio fans? David here from Prime Audio Reviews. Simgot decided to go with a vivid green box. I'm not sure what the reasoning was. Look at that sneak peek of the frequency response graph right there, and yeah, that's the box. So inside, you do get a carrying case. It is the standard, recent, contemporary Simgot carrying case. It's a black zipper one. And you get, I think, only 3 pairs of silicone ear tips, which is pretty terrible for a $100 plus IEM. I'm assuming or hoping that the extra cost went into that exotic driver mix and into this lovely cable, which we'll look at real quick. 0.78 millimeter 2-pin connectors, pretty standard. It is not a modular cable. It comes with a 3.5. It's probably available with a 4.4 termination. Don't quote me on that. But the cable itself, silver-plated copper, obviously, which is the norm these days. And yeah, it's pretty good. It's nice and chunky. Well, it's not super fat, but it's chunky enough. It feels robust. It handles really well. No microphonics. Great cable. So let's bring in these beauties now, and look there. Whoa. Hey. Yeah, that's right. These are a little bit low key in their appearance, which is refreshing if I'm being honest. Like, I know it's not the EA series, but we've gone away from those polished silver shells and we've got this instead. Nice matte dark gray faceplates with a gold circle there, broken up by a little vent in the middle. The actual shells or the housings are 3D printed resin, and also interestingly we've got triple bore nozzles there as well, so pretty fancy stuff. But wait, I haven't told you the price yet. The price of the Supermix 4 is $149 US. So we're in that entry level, getting up there, not quite mid-tier in the price range, but entry level still. 149, pretty affordable, lots of competition. I will just quickly say that I find these shells very comfortable. They are super good to wear, for at least for my ears, and I can wear them all day long. And with that said, it's time to talk about how they sound. But before I get into the details, I need to talk about the impedance, because the impedance of the Supermix 4 is a rather low 7.2 ohms, and that might mean nothing to some people. It might mean a lot to other people, but basically what it means, at least in my interpretation, you do need a source, i.e. a player or whatever, wherever the music is coming, whatever you're plugging these into, with a low impedance output. I should say a low output impedance rather. So yeah, just to put that into context, when I first listened to these a few days ago, so in the morning I plugged these into my Shanling UP4 2022 edition, and was pretty impressed right away. I was like, wow, these are actually pretty good, regardless of the driver configuration, driver count, and the price, all that stuff. They sound pretty good. And I was enjoying the sound. Then I arrived at work later in the day. For some reason, I plugged them directly into my laptop. I usually use a dongle DAC with my laptop most of the time, but for some reason I just plugged it directly in. And after a short amount of time, I started thinking, was I dreaming before? Because suddenly these sounded dreadful. They sounded terrible. I couldn't figure out what it was, and then I thought, oh man, maybe I need to test out a DAC. So I pulled out the dongle DAC, plugged these in, and suddenly the sound was good again. So plugged directly into my laptop, the bass was massive. It was like almost bass head level. It was muddy. It was super thick and super warm, and it just sounded nasty. Once I pulled out the dongle DAC, which is designed for audiophiles and these fancy IEMs, suddenly it sounded great again. So you do need to pay attention to what kind of source you have. I would recommend at the very minimum a dongle DAC or, you know, desktop DAC, something with a low output impedance. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the sound. So Supermix 4, it's got the really warm and musical sound signature, but it's offset by a little bit of zest in the upper mid-range and the lower treble. It's a kind of a mix of tonal richness and technical agility, and that's what sets the Supermix 4 apart from, you know, other similarly priced IEMs, aided of course by that exotic driver configuration and a bit of clever tuning. Right, let's talk about the bass, and keep in mind what I said before. You have to be mindful of the source you use, because with my laptop, the bass was just pretty horrible. It was so thick, so fat. It was kind of fun, but it was not just didn't work. The whole sound signature was off. With the right source though, the bass tightened up nicely. It became much more balanced with the mid-range and the treble. So it is slightly enhanced, but it's not a bass head IEM. I think if you are a bass head, you might be satisfied with the quantity of the bass here. It is nice and upfront, it's there, but it is not dominating at all. There is an emphasis on the sub bass, but thankfully the mid bass is present as well. It's not sucked out, it's not anemic, so you do get some pretty good body in the bass, mid and upper bass. And it looks like I forgot to throw up the graph, so let's have a look at that now. Pretty sexy looking graph in my opinion. Have a look at that. So we got a light V shape going on. I'm not going to go into too much detail with the graph, because some people have no idea what that means. So I'm going to talk about it. Moving on to the mid-range. Now, the mid-range is on the warmer side of neutral. It's got a very forward presentation. It's got plenty of warmth. It's got a nice, rich and a smooth sound or character in the mids. Full-bodied vocals, full-bodied instruments. And while the mids are slightly darkened, they have a slightly darker tone. This is contrasted by a more pronounced upper mid-range and lower treble, which helps to maintain clarity and detail. So the rich mid-range, it's actually got really good resolution within the mid-range. It's facilitated by nice clean transients thanks to those speedy drivers that we've got there, and they prevent mushiness or congestion. And like snare attacks are perhaps slightly softened, like percussion attacks, but the overall transient response is nice and crisp. And again, that's due to the BA and planar drivers that are doing that. Occasionally, I did hear a little hint of sharpness or shoutiness in the upper mids, but really only at higher volumes. But those moments were infrequent enough to not be problematic. Like, it was very rare. Occasionally, I just thought, oop, that those belting female vocals, or oop, that, you know, screeching electric guitar is a little bit edgy, but for the most part, not a problem. And then we've got the treble. The treble, it's neither overly aggressive nor too relaxed, but it's definitely instrumental in the tonal balance of the Supermix 4. And while the treble doesn't stand out, as it's not the most sparkly or effervescent treble, but it does provide ample clarity and definition. There's just enough energy there to complement the warmth of the bass and those warm mid-range, without veering into harshness. And extending further, the treble, it's really nicely done. It's refined, it's controlled, and although it's a slightly warm treble, it's very precise as well. And the treble tuning, like, it avoids any sibilance, and it's not piercing or harsh, so it's good for fatigue-free listening. But at the same time, it does create a nice sense of airiness and spaciousness. So it's a really nicely tuned treble. Finally, for the soundstage technicalities, we've got pretty impressive soundstage. It's not huge because we've got a slightly warm, darker tone. So the soundstage isn't going to be, really expansive, but it is very organized, and that's partly due to the excellent resolution. It's got really precise imaging, so if you're into imaging, positioning of instruments and vocals, whatnot, if you're into gaming, very good for that. So it's got really nice spatial accuracy and depth, which makes vocal and instrument placement easy to determine within those boundaries of the soundstage. Rightio, couple of quick comparisons. We're gonna start with the AFL Explorer, which is another recent release. Now this one comes in, I think it was $119. Kind of similar quantities of bass. The Explorer is a little bit more forward in the lower mid-range, but it's also more forward in the upper mid-range and the lower treble. So the Explorer here, slightly more forward in the lower mids, but it's also less emphasized or less forward in the upper mids and the lower treble. So the Explorer is another warm sounding IEM. It's actually the tonality is kind of similar on both in terms of the bass and the mid-range, but the Supermix 4 has got a little more airiness and spaciousness in the treble. Now we have to keep in mind that the Supermix 4 is a bit more expensive. It's about $30 extra. And I think the Supermix 4's cable is a lot nicer than the Explorer's one as well, just as an aside. So like I mentioned, the Supermix 4 can on occasion get a little bit shouty in the upper mids. If you are sort of averse to that, or if you are sensitive to those upper mid and lower treble areas, then the Explorer is a really good one for you. This is a super safe tuning that sort of you never have to worry about any harshness or sharpness or sibilance, just smooth sailing all the way. But it can't quite compete on a technical level with the Supermix 4 with those, I keep saying this, exotic drivers. It is a very good $119 IM, there's no doubt about it, especially if you want something that's warm, smooth, non-fatiguing, still musical, but pretty good in a technical sense. So yeah, that's the Explorer. And then we'll look at the Kinera Celeste Relentless. So the Relentless here is it's a 7 driver IEM. It's got 1 dynamic driver and 6 balanced armatures per side. And it has a fairly similar tuning. The main differences between these two are in the upper mid-range and the treble, where the Relentless is a bit more forward, giving it a brighter tone than the Supermix 4. However, the Relentless doesn't have as much treble extension, so although it does have good detail retrieval, it's not quite as revealing as the Supermix 4. Now, apart from the differences in tone, the Relentless isn't quite as resolving, nor does it match the imaging precision of the Supermix 4. So this is a good IEM. It's actually a little bit more expensive, I think. Let me check that. Yeah, the Relentless is $169. I don't think it's quite as resolving. It doesn't have as much resolution as the Supermix 4. It is a good IEM. The shells are bigger though. It does have a slightly wider soundstage. It does have very good comparable detail retrieval. And it does have a slightly brighter tone and perhaps more perceived clarity. Where the Supermix really shines is in its resolution. Although its tone is a little bit darker, it does have very good instrument separation, really good imaging, and for the most part it's a fairly laid back sound. So that is the Simgot Supermix 4. I think it's a good one. Is everyone going to love it? Probably. I'm not sure. If you're a treble head, you might be looking for a little bit more spice in the highs. If you're a bass head, you might be looking for a little bit more, ultimate impact in the lows. But for the most part, this is a very likable IEM. I like the design, it's comfortable. Comes with a good cable, but a pretty poor selection of ear tips. So if it's your very first IEM, you might want to consider something that comes with a better, bigger variety of ear tips, because when you're dealing with IEMs, I probably don't need to tell 90% of you this. When you're dealing with IEMs, you absolutely need to get a very good fit and a good seal with your selected ear tips. So if you're not getting a good seal with your ear tips, you won't get the full bass response. It'll sound very thin, it'll sound sharp and bright. And on top of that, if you don't have the good fit, they just won't feel secure in your ears. It'll feel like they keep falling out, or they're not stable. But I think I'm getting a bit off track. Coming back to the Supermix 4, this is a pretty good one. I think most people are going to love it. Affordable, great build quality, pretty impressive sound, to be honest, especially in terms of resolution and detail retrieval for this price point. So that's it. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, Parfam audiophile style. And if you're new here, consider hitting that subscribe button if you want to see more of my videos in the future. Until next time, I'll see you later.